Hey, welcome to Becoming Ultra. I'm Scott Jones, your host. You guys are listening to the second episode, and all you need to know about what day it is in the world is know that this is the second episode of December, so it must be December 2nd. There you go. That's how we're going to figure out where we are in this big haze of the holiday season that it might be, wherever you might be in the world, if the holidays do exist. If not, maybe you're actually relaxing a little bit. I don't know. It's always pretty relaxed for us around holidays. Our busy season's a little less for the events that me and my wife put on. You know, clients aren't quite as committed, which is fine. It's a time for us to refocus, at least the local clients, not my virtual athletes. Those guys are always getting after it. But anyway, what we're doing is a show a day. I've challenged myself to see if I could ever be a radio host. That's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but what I want to do is see if I can give you guys as much back as I possibly can in this last month of the year. A lot to give you the energy and the excitement and the information you need to tackle your next year of training. A lot of it to give you more information, to give you the courage or the energy to sign up for your first ultra or anything that's big and epic in your mind. So hopefully it's helping. I hope you guys liked the first episode. It was how to choose a race. Had a really good time presenting that one. The next episode is going to be, let's see here, number 3. What is a good baseline run to test progress? And that's going to tie in pretty well with what today's topic is. Today's topic is what are 3 easy ways to use heart rate training on runs. And the way I'm going to break that down is 3 ways to use heart rate training on runs. I'm going to teach you how to number 1, find a decent max heart rate, or at least get close to it, without having to go get a VO2 max taken or without having to go pay a lot of money. So that's going to be the first way, is figure out your baseline. And then I'm going to give you guys 2 workouts that you can do when you're out on the trails, out on the paths, on the track, on the treadmill, on the stairmat, wherever you might be. These will be good for that. Before we do that, on matters of the heart, since we'll be speaking of the literal heart today as it pertains to running and performance, let's speak on the figurative version of the heart. Man, I don't know. This week has just been really cool as far as getting the feedback and getting the response from people that I hoped I'd get from diving in and opening up a little bit online through the podcast and through other projects I'm doing. But people are opening up, and people are struggling with motivation, and people are going through tragedies. Like I lost my dad last year. It was a big tragedy for me and personally, and nothing really happened to me, but dealing with the loss of someone close is always interesting. I've never really had to do that. Yesterday, I won't name names, but one of our new members of Team BU shared a story. We talked running so usually for Team BU when they come over, I do like a coaching consult. Like basically, do you have any goals? What are the goals? What questions do you have about your training? Can I take a look and just like point people in the right direction, basically, and say hi and say thanks and all that stuff. Well, we talked for about 15 minutes on running, and then for the next 20 minutes, we just talked about life stuff, which is really cool. But she had lost her dad like literally a month after I lost mine last year. And she turned to running as her therapy, as a lot of us do in times of tragedy. And we just kind of talked about it like it was unexpected, probably more unexpected than my dad's death. My dad had been having a little bit of health problems for sure. Her parents had been married for close to 40 years, so had mine. The dynamics changed in her family, so have mine, like they will anytime you lose somebody. It was just I don't know, man. It was really cool. It was really cool to connect with somebody that lives nowhere near me on something like that. And I've had, 2 or 3 interactions with people that are just trying to figure things out. Trying to get motivated because they know they expect more of themselves. And there's people out there that are going through tough times, but they seem really strong on the outside. You got to reach out to people, guys. Like, you've got to follow your gut. If you haven't heard from a friend from a while, stop looking at Twitter for 5 seconds and just reach out. It doesn't take that long. Me and my wife have this conversation all the time. She thinks I'm the best person to keep in touch and connect that she knows. Like, she asks me all the time how I do it, and it's kind of a joke because she just it's not part of her personality to continually connect. And with my dad being a coach and having athletes at my house all the time, like, there's always like this team atmosphere and this connection. So I kind of get it now that it's not intuitive, but I will say either is running 100 miles. And if those things aren't intuitive, but we can teach ourselves how to do it, then let's reteach ourselves how to connect with people, especially because there's 800 points of contact that we can do, whether it's a messenger on Facebook, on WhatsApp, hopping on Skype, texting people, calling, emailing. I mean, there's a junk load of ways to do this. So especially the people you think are the strongest, especially the people you admire the most, reach out, just check in on them every once in a while. It makes a huge difference. All right. Let's talk about physiology a little bit. The physiology of running. My background was exercise physiology. When I was coming up, I spent my GA, my grad assistantship at Marshall University for my exercise physiology degree was spent testing athletes on VO2s, hydrostatic wings, wing gaits, and manual body fat tests, like all of your basic physiological metrics for athletes and otherwise, but we worked with mostly athletes at the university. I have probably administered, I don't know, I'm going to say at least 1,000 VO2 max tests. Back in the day when you had to actually calibrate the machine before every test to make sure it was accurate. The machines now are way better at calibrating themselves, but we'd use this pump, and we'd pump what felt and mimicked breathing of of human breathing, based on lung capacity and how much air was coming in and out, so that it would test what it thought it was testing, just to get it reliable and valid before we would do those VO2s. And so anyway, the reason I was doing all those VO2s, the facility that I started at, we use VO2 max as our baseline test to get max heart rate, to get VO2 max, to get all of our heart rate training zones. We would find out what anaerobic threshold was. We'd set up zones based on that. We'd find out where your optimal aerobic pace would be based on your heart rate. So with every heart rate that you have, there is a correlative percentage of fat versus carbohydrate usage as far as what you're using for energy. And you can tell there's a perfect correlation between heart rate and the fuel that you use. So we would use all of those things and get really scientific. And then we would use a lot of that information just for basic weight loss, for performance. And all of our clients at the facility, whether they were in a football player training for the NFL Combine or an endurance athlete, would wear a heart rate monitor, and we would put them through different types of interval training. So I wanted to give you that background a little bit because a couple of the workouts I'm going to give you, having that background is going to help, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. So I'm not going to explain what happens in all of your zones right now. I'm going to explain a couple ways that you can test for getting close to your max heart rate. What's good enough? We'll say what's good enough for most people that want to use heart rate for training to get the best out of it. And then I'm going to give you a couple ideas that you can use out on the trails that are pretty basic. Like, you don't need anything but a heart rate monitor on your wrist so you can see where you're at. And a lot of these heart rate monitors you can set up to buzz when you go outside certain zones. So you can get as techy as you want to, but let's just give you guys some ideas. So traditionally, to find your maximal heart rate, there's a formula, 220 minus your age. All of these formulas, like when you do a body fat test with calipers, it's based on a regression equation. It's based on the gold standard, which is hydrostatic weighing. When you do 220 minus your age, it's based on tons of people finding out their max heart rate by hopping on a treadmill with EKGs on and heart rate monitors and all those things. So we do regression equations off of huge samples so that we can get pretty close. If you hear a pause every once in a while on my voice, it's because it's Friday night. This is what happens on Friday night. I get up at 3:30 on Fridays and I go crazy, so I can tell when my brain's not thinking as well. But I'm there with you guys. So 220 minus your age. Regression equation, there's standard deviations on all of these regression equations. The standard deviation off of the 220 minus your age is plus or minus 12. beats per minute. So 220, I'm 39, so that would be 181 would be my estimated maximal heart rate. That standard deviation puts me at 169 or 193 for a range. So 169 to 193 for your max heart rate is a freaking huge. There's a huge gap there. You have no idea what your actual max is. So that's why we like to do something that's a little more real. So the 2 ways that I'm going to prescribe you guys to go try this out. Now, this is the part where I say I'm not a doctor. Please make sure you have clearance before you go work at a high rate of effort. These are things that I do with clients that sign waivers on a regular basis. So just keep this stuff in mind. But the first one would be, well, first of all, you have to it's ideally you have a heart rate monitor, because stopping to take heart rate is going to skew a little bit. So if you had, we're just going to assume that everybody has a heart rate monitor in 2017. If you don't, it's fine. You can figure out. But we're going for the rest of the show, we're just going to assume that you have a heart rate monitor. All right, go out, run a mile as hard as you can. When you're about 100 feet from the end, look at your watch. What's your heart rate? You're probably pretty close to your max. This is a full out gut-busting effort. So that's one way to do it. Not the most fun way, but alas, you can get close to your max. The way that I would prescribe most people to do it is find a treadmill, have a buddy, or you can have a little notepad by you if you want to. The reason I like the second one is because we find out more than just your max. And so what we're going to do, if you don't have somebody to record your heart rates throughout this test, then you can record them yourself. It's not that hard. You might have to remember a couple numbers, but having a buddy do it or help you out is the best way to do it. So you can get on a treadmill. I'm going to assume that everybody is fit enough to jog. Okay, so fit enough to jog. You know, when we would have people who weren't fit enough to jog for 8 or 9 minutes, then we'd walk at a really efficient pace, which is usually like 3 to 3.5 miles per hour. So fit enough to jog. What I want you to do for the first 3 minutes is ramp up from about 5 miles per hour. The next minute you're going to go 5.5. The next minute, if you can go up to 6, then that's great. If not, then stay where you're efficient and you know you can run. Like if you're going to run on flat ground, you could run at that pace for 20, 25, 30 minutes or forever. Get to that pace. And so that left column is going to be speed, the middle column is going to be incline, and the right column is going to be heart rate. So we want this test to last for about 6-7 minutes to about 10 to 12 minutes, somewhere in there. Anything less than 5 is not long enough. Anything more than 12 is too easy in the beginning. So we want to get you there pretty quick. So for the first minute, your speed, whatever that efficient pace is, let's say it's 6 miles per hour, that pace is going to stay the same for the whole workout. So you can just put 6 all the way down that left column. For the incline, we're going to start at 1%. And then we're going to go 2, 3, 4 all the way down. So for the first minute at 6 miles per hour and 1% grade, at the end of that minute, what is your heart rate? And at the end of that minute, you go directly up to 2%. Run for that minute. At the end of that minute, what is your heart rate? Record it, go up to 3%. You're going to do this until you get to the point where when you're halfway through with that minute, you know that you're not going to be able to complete it without losing your form, getting sloppy, getting hurt, getting thrown off the treadmill. It sounds pretty brutal, but most people know before they're about to start the failure minute where they are, and then we're going to record all of those heart rates. The reason this is such a good, this kind of answers a lot of the question for the next show, but the reason this is so good is because you can go back after 6 to 8 weeks when typical physiological change takes place and see what those heart rates are at the same workloads. If those heart rates are lower at the same workloads, then you know that your training's working. Your base is improving, your fitness is improving, and you know that everything that you're doing is paying off. You know, if your heart rate at 6 miles per hour and 10% grade, if you can make it that far today, is 172 beats per minute, and in 2 months it's 160 beats per minute, that's a huge benefit, because it tells us that you can run at a higher workload or you can run at a higher effort with a lower workload, which is huge because you can run faster without it feeling as hard. So what we're going to do with either number that we find is your max. So the last heart rate, the highest heart rate that you record on this part, we're going to call your max for argument's sake. whatever the heart rate is at the end of a really hard mile effort. We're going to call your max for argument's sake, and then we're just going to take 80% of that number, and we're going to work with that for the 2 workouts that I'm going to give you. So let's say that number is, I don't know, my max right now is probably about 165. I'm going to go down to 160 for math's sake, and go 80% of 160 is, oh man, I didn't bring a calculator. All right, boom. I'm doing some old school math. Do they still do that? All right, 128. So 128 is 80% of that max that I figured out, and so that's going to be my number for a lot of these trainings. So 128 is going to be at 80%. 80% is typically that number between zone 3 and 4. So one little thing about zones that will explain heart rate zones, because we prescribe workouts and training oftentimes on those zones, is that the space between 3 and 4 is typically considered your anaerobic threshold. What does that mean? It means that when you get over that threshold, your body starts accumulating lactic acid. It means that the pace that you're going no longer allows you to buffer lactic acid, and lactic acid is that burning, painful stuff, that toxin that gets into your blood when you're busting your butt up a hill or for long efforts. Another method, if you listen to me at one of me and Susan's calls recently, lactic acid is out of your system pretty darn soon after you're done. So the next morning, when you feel that hurting and burning in your legs, that's an inflammatory response. That is not lactic acid. That comes from micro tears from the trauma of working and pounding on the pavement or the trail. Anyway, I digress. So that 128 is going to be my, we'll call that my anaerobic threshold, the heart rate at which anaerobic threshold occurs. When you no longer can buffer lactic acid, you have to slow down. Your body has to make up for that because you can't work at a high level for a long period of time when lactic acid is accumulating. And for long distance runners, it's really important to build aerobic base, all of that base below that anaerobic threshold. As when we're talking about base, that's the base we speak of all the time. That happens oftentimes in zone 2 and at the bottom of zone 3 is a sweet spot for ultra runners especially. But we're not going to talk about all the physiological benefits of those. That's a whole nother conversation. So figure out what that max is for you. Figure out what the 80% is, and then we can go out and have some fun with that number. Okay, so let's say that number for me is 128, which sounds really low, and it probably is. It is, because I said I was rounding down because I was cheating. So the 2 workouts that I'm going to give you guys. The first one, I love doing this first one when I'm on like a big trail or a big long, we'll say long as 10 to anything over 10 miles in the hills, where there's a lot of contour and variation in the terrain. If you're down in Florida, you don't have a lot of that, so it's going to have to be based on effort, which is fine as well. But I like it because it kind of keeps you honest. So I want to be able to go out there, and I'm going to do a long sustained effort at below AT. But I'm not going to stay as far below AT as I possibly can. My whole goal on this 2 hours, or on this 45 minutes, or on this 5 hours, it doesn't matter. The time on feet for this workout really doesn't matter. It's the focusing in on your effort that really matters, and being specific with it. So for this long sustained effort, I am not to go over that 128. So based on my fitness, it might look like a really slow hike on a big uphill. It might look like I can get to a pretty decent pace on some flat stuff, maybe turn it up a little bit on the downhills. I don't know what it looks like. It depends on my fitness. But with that discipline, you're going to feel pretty good. You're not ever going to feel like you're taxing really hard. You're going to work aerobically for the whole day, and it's going to be a challenge to see where you are based on being able. Well, it's going to be a challenge to run slower or put a slower effort in that you typically would. Being able to go all the way up to AT, it'll give you some of that kick that you typically like. But you're definitely going to want to open it up more than you're allowed to for this run. So that's a great one to fit in for some of your longer efforts, some of your middle distances in the middle of the week, just to ensure that you're staying aerobic. And even though I'm talking about staying aerobic for this, I don't want you guys to get the idea that working anaerobically is a bad thing. It's actually really, really good for your system. So that is another thing that's a different conversation. I hate when we talk about one thing physiologically and it looks like that's the end-all be-all, but really it's just a little piece of the puzzle. So this is a piece of the training puzzle for you guys. So that's one, long sustained efforts under AT, under that 80% mark. And then the second one is going to be heart rate intervals. So I like doing these because doing timed intervals gets really frustrating because you have to keep looking down or you have to wait for the beep and all that stuff. And sometimes it sucks because, you know, if you're doing intervals on a big hill and then your cooldown is on a downhill, then you kind of get irritated. So I like to do heart rate based intervals because it's based on workload. And the way you do that is we're going to set, you can do any variance that you want, but this works pretty darn well. So you're going to set a 30 beats per minute variance. And that variance, so let's say my variance is going to be, my top end is going to be just over anaerobic threshold because I want to work into that system a little bit. So we'll say 135, and my bottom end is going to be 105. Actually, that's too much. We'll say 20 beat variance because the cooldown needs to be a little closer since we'll be moving the whole time. So we'll say 135 and 115. That seems reasonable. So set a 20 beats per minute variance, and what you're going to do is you can go out for your run. So I don't care about distance. Maybe time on feet works better for this one. So we'll say an hour and a half run. And every time I get to that top end, I'm going to slow down, walk, easy jog, whatever I have to do to get my heart rate back to that bottom end. And when it gets to that bottom end, I'm going to start back up again. And then we're going to just continually do that for the duration. You can do it for intervals. So you can say, okay, I'm going to do 15 of these. You can do it for the duration of a run. You can increase the variance or decrease the variance as you get out there. So you can say, okay, I'm going to start for the first 20 minutes at a 30 beats per minute variance. And then every 10 minutes, I'm going to drop 5 beats. So then I'm going to go 25, 20, 15. There are a million different ways that you can do that. And it's really fun. You can change the top end. So I can start my top end at 135, where I have to cool down at 115, and then I can go up to 145, and maybe I keep that lower end at 115, or maybe I bring that lower end up. It's based on the effort that you want to give on that day, and my best advice is to just lock in what your goal is for that day and stick to it. Don't try to do 20 different types of intervals on that day. Just stick to one of those models, and it really works. So those are 3 ideas. How do you get to your max heart rate, and then a couple workouts, the intervals and the long sustained sub anaerobic threshold effort out on the trails. So I hope that helps, guys. If you have any questions on this stuff, it's really, you just have to understand the guiding principle of the heart rate training. Understanding AT just a little bit. We can go into detail at a different time on that. But if you understand just the idea of speed play, work play, load play, being able to change efforts and to control efforts, then you're going to have a fun time with it. Because what I see with most people that have heart rate monitors, they don't look at the dang things, and when they do, they're just looking for their assumed max. So let's use those heart rate monitors for a little more scientific purposes out there on the trails. Anyway, see you guys. No, I won't. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Hope you guys are having a great December. I'm going to be out in Boulder tomorrow morning running, and we're so friggin' spoiled right now. It's going to be 65 degrees, so maybe I'll take a picture for the world to see. Maybe I will. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it. Holy moly, I almost forgot, guys. I am going to be putting a chart at becomingultra.com/December 2, December the number 2, and the chart is going to be that little test, the treadmill test. Common sense, yes, but you can go and throw your email in there, download the PDF, and you can print it out and use it however you like, and hopefully that'll help you for your pre and post test. There'll be a pre and a post testing area, so make sure you go hop on there. And remember, Rocky Mountain Trail Camp pre-registration is open. December 1st through 10th is the discounted rate. It won't ever go that low again unless you are on the team Becoming Ultra, Team BU. So, all right, guys. See you later.